Hi, it's Dave. Today I'm joined by Emmet Peppers, a frequent guest on my investing channel. And today we're going to actually talk about a parenting question. And I decided to bring it onto this channel. And it's from a Twitter user, K-Money. It says, love these videos with Emmet. I have an off-topic question. I'm expecting my first child at the end of September. What are your top tips for a first-time dad? And yeah, I thought that
Mm.
was kind of a cool question.
Yeah,
Um,
that was cool. That is cool.
and I
Yeah,
think
I mean, there's a lot
everyone's
of first-time dads around coming around
Yeah,
now.
everyone's
Feel
gonna
like
have a different answer. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. What are the ages of your kids?
9, 7, and 5.
Okay,
Yep. So,
got it.
yep.
Um, yeah, top tips. I mean, so maybe we'll go back and forth on this as we think of ideas. But one of the tips that I think, and these tips are very, very, I think, like uh, it might not be applicable to everyone in their situation. So I'll just share kind of
Sure.
from my
Yeah.
own perspective. But one of the things I did before our first was born was that I think was super helpful is I tried to objectively understand how much the child would require and demand in terms of
Hmm.
time, energy, oversight, guidance, mentoring, all that stuff. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. How much is this child really going to require? And I came up with this whole kind of mental model where I'm like, wow, like up until they're 5 years old or 6 years old or whenever, like they're going to require quite a lot of energy, right? And
Yes.
I started to think in my head, like, oh, it's like at birth, it's the most, and it's going to go
Yeah.
down, slightly over time until a point where, it's not taking up all the energy it did before, right? And
Yeah.
I started to map that. I'm like, oh, it's gonna take 5 or 6 years, like for a kid to get to this place where they can have the tools, the independence, the thinking, whatever, um,
Yeah.
on their own. And so I um, after doing that, I'm like, okay, I need to reprioritize my life in a way. It's like,
Smart.
and yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, I have to reprioritize my expectations of what I could do. So I started to mentally say,
Yeah.
oh, it's going to actually be quite a while before I could do certain things like that require, certain amounts of focus and attention, et cetera, because
Yeah.
there'll be a competition, right? Or a battle. So by doing that, it's actually like kind of, um, created this thing in my mind where it's like a stage where I have this stage of investing. The first 5 or 6 years of my kids' lives are very, very important. The first actually couple years are the most important. They take the most time.
Hmm.
And I felt myself, I wasn't battling with kind of trying to do too many other things because I already had accepted that there's going to be a lot of needs, but all of these
Yes.
needs are actually temporary. It's all passing and it's changing, month to month, year to year. But just like thinking from that angle alone, it kind of just like totally opened up kind of this relaxed freedom with my kids and this ability to just spend the time I think they need, with
Yeah.
me. Um, but yeah, how
It's
about on
very
your end?
wise. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have that wisdom going into it to kind of totally reset my expectations of how my life is going to be. Like I knew things were going to change, but I didn't prepare myself the same way, unfortunately. I mean, it was fine. I learned, but I learned the hard way, just kind of being thrown into the mix of, all right, my time is not my time anymore. It's this little human being's time, and I can't do what I want anymore. I gotta attend to this little thing and my wife too and I guess looking back what I tell people when they're getting ready is people that are kind of that I know that are getting pregnant. I'm like, well, just be ready to lose a lot of sleep and maximize your sleep because me and my wife both really need the proper amount of sleep. If we both go a few days in a row with like a lack of sleep, we both get like cranky and we start like fighting about things and cranky with our kids even, and so optimizing sleep uh, was probably the most important thing we had to learn. And that means like when the baby goes for a nap, I go for a nap. Like like our kids, they would, the first 6 months. I was telling my 9-year-old tonight, like the first 6 or 9 months of each of our kids' lives, they would wake up every 2 hours crying, like they wouldn't sleep more than 2 hours. Like
Mm-hmm.
it would be my duty a lot of times at night to be with the baby like all night long, every 2 hours. Sometimes we'd take turns, but my wife was with the kid all day and having a hard time catching up on sleep, and then she would catch up a little bit at night, and I'd go to work during the day, and so it's a tough 6 months if your kid's not sleeping great. And then an exit plan out of that sleep, we did something called the Gerber method. I don't know if you heard of it, the sleep training method, which for us worked well to get them to start sleeping through the night around 6 or 9 months. And that
Mm-hmm.
range is when they suggest you do it if you're going to do it. But I know people who've had kids that their kids still don't sleep through the night or don't sleep well until like 2 or 3 even. And I'm like, wow, that's hard to like go that long, like waking up all night or having your kids like not sleep and stuff. And so yeah, the sleep stuff, I wish I prepared better for,
Mm-hmm.
because and then on top of that, like once this last kid came around, I sort of started working on my diet too, and that helped my mood and my sleep too, but I didn't really work on my diet until then. I wish I kind of worked on just getting healthier physically in a lot of ways ahead of that first kid, because then it would let me handle the stresses of, not
Yeah.
owning my own time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. On sleep, yeah, I have mixed opinions on sleep training. Um, yeah, we read a ton of books on sleep training, and on for our first child, we tried it. Probably I forget, maybe around 7, 8, 9 months or something. Um,
mhm.
and yeah, it didn't work well, like at all. And
What happened? It just like
um,
what
I think
happened?
what there's a combination where he has a super like strong personality,
Hmm.
and I think also there were some health issues too, where he
Mm.
needed actually more attention. And I think it was actually counterproductive to do sleep training in that manner. And so actually
Hmm.
after like three few weeks, we actually stopped and just kind of tabled it. And actually it was actually probably one of the best decisions we did. Um,
Wow.
yeah, to table it because yeah, it was, yeah. And then we actually found ways to actually sleep, um, and with our and a lot of it is the personality of the kid too. It's like some
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
like they can, like, yeah, they're so different, each child too.
Yeah.
And so, um,
Yeah.
yeah, so,
Yeah, our second kid, we did this sort of things. Like our first kid it worked well with. Our second kid, we started it at like 6 months because we're
yeah,
like, oh, let's just do this because we can't sleep. We did it with the first one, so we did the same thing. It didn't work so well after like a few days, and we stopped it because it was a different personality, like you said. So you have to kind
yeah,
of, I think it's hard to judge it. He had like eczema issues, so we were like putting mittens on his hands so he wouldn't
yeah,
scratch his face, and it was just out of control. We are like, after a few days, we're like, we just can't do it. And then we went back to it like around 9 months, and it seemed to work okay. But like, it might not have been. It worked for us, but like, we just didn't see another way out of
yeah,
the kid waking up every 3 hours,
yeah,
looking to get attention or help someone to put him back to sleep.
yeah,
Because the body naturally goes through sleep cycles. What we read is like every 3 hours, and we naturally wake up every 3 hours throughout the night, and it's sort of like you have to train. Like we felt like we wanted to train our kids to learn to put themselves back to sleep, and that
yeah.
was the only way we could think of.
Yeah. What ended up happening with us with sleep training or sleeping is my wife, we just got like a king size bed on the ground,
Mm.
and my wife would just lay down next to our, our kid, and just kind of just, just let the kid sleep, meaning like, they would talk a bit and then just try to help the child sleep, but with my wife next to the child. And then,
That's a good idea.
yeah, and then after the kid's sleeping, my wife would either just stay there, browsing her phone on the bed, or just slip out and come back in and just sleep
Hmm.
with the child through the night.
As he woke up, he would
Just,
see his wife,
yeah, and
his
just go
mom
back to
next to him,
sleep,
and be able to fall
actually.
back to sleep
Yeah, yeah. So they would,
without having to be held or coddled, but just next to
exactly,
them.
yeah,
Oh,
kind of
that's a
go
good
back to
idea.
sleep. Or actually, like when they were nursing, they would, actually, even that, we would try to, not nurse too much at night. But that actually worked great, actually, for
Yeah.
our kids. But yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I think it's dependent on each kid. I'm
Yeah.
wondering. One other kind of idea or thing that I was thinking about was when my wife was pregnant with our first, I started to do this thing where I would just like connect with the child in the womb, and
Hmm.
like my wife was
Talk to
kind of like,
them or
yeah, my wife was a
just
little
like
bit
play
like,
with them.
yeah, my wife was a little bit like, what are you doing, right? And like, I'm like,
Yeah.
this is the perfect time to
Yeah.
get bonded, with the child,
Yeah.
and so um, I would actually just like kind of like um, just sense the bond and actually
Yeah.
just like um, picture like kind of a relationship there already, and
Yeah.
so by the time our first son came out of my wife's womb, like I felt like he wasn't a foreign person. It was like I felt I already knew him.
Yeah.
It was just kind of this
Yeah.
weird like, hey, how's it going? Welcome. It's
Yeah.
just like it was interesting. Yeah,
Another weird thing, I don't know, I hope this isn't it's not really
yeah,
too weird, but now that you talk about that is I didn't do it with my firstborn, but somehow I read something in the secondborn I did it, and the thirdborn I did it even more. But like when they're babies, when they're like, a few weeks to a few months or 6 months old, like the skin time. I don't know if you heard that, but like you
yeah,
take your
yeah.
shirt off and you let the baby like sit with skin to skin. There's some like extra connection, and I feel like it did make a difference.
Mm.
I do feel like a little more not that I feel like they're more connected to me the second and third than the first in a way. And I don't know if it has to do with that, to be honest, but I did that, a decent amount of times with both those kids. And I wish I knew about it with my first kid too, but I just never thought of it or read about it or anything.
Yeah, yeah. Another kind of thing I think about with you know kids or tips is like before having our kids, like amongst my friends or acquaintances, like we got pregnant, we had our kid kind of on the later side, kind of in our late 30s. So a lot of our friends, our friends already had their kids. They're already like older kids, and they would volunteer their own advice, even
Lots of
unsolicited.
that. Yeah.
And a lot of parents have, or at least people I knew, have a lot of issues, a lot of preconceived experiences, right? So they're kind of like, oh my gosh, you're gonna be so tired, and it's gonna be
Yeah.
like you have no life, and all this
Yeah.
stuff, and
Yeah.
and I remember hearing all that stuff, and um, it's like, or some people are saying, oh, you can never do anything that you want to do anymore, or something, all this stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's like what I say basically. Anyway, go on. I want to hear. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I
It's
remember,
probably not the right thing. Yeah.
yeah, I remember hearing that, and I could catch the bias, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like you're saying that because you're having a hard time with it,
Hmm.
and therefore you're projecting kind of that hardship. You haven't solved the problem yourself. Like it
Yeah.
hasn't become easy for you, or you're still
It's
struggling with
true.
it, and then you're carrying that bias over to the other person who you think is going to struggle in the same way that you did. And so when
Yeah.
I'm hearing this, I'm like, oh my, I could totally catch it. I'm like, that's what's happening, right? And I would like kind of chuckle in my head and say, you know, that's your experience parenting,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I
Dude, I
remember,
think you're like a special type of guy though that can see that and kind of like have that type of experience you're having. You have to like hopefully this channel is like expressing how to help other people
yeah,
have a similar solution that you have for
yeah,
this because
because
this is a
what
problem for most of us.
yeah, it's because so when I was hearing that stuff, I'm like, it actually motivated me more to go into kind of like the first principles of parenting, because I'm like,
Hmm.
that doesn't make any sense if
Yeah.
parenting has to suck. Like, what's the point? It's like I'm not having kids so the experience sucks. So
Yeah.
I can't have a life and whatever, right? It's like that's not the whole point of it, right? I'm like, there's got to
Yeah.
be a better way, And I'm hearing like
Yeah.
all this from all my friends, or people are saying the same thing. I'm like, what in the world? And I think all of that just kind of gave me that extra kind of like chip. I don't want to say chip on my shoulder, but this extra edge where I'm like, there's got to be something about the essence, the first principles of parenting, where
Yeah.
it actually can be awesome. Like it could be just like
Yeah.
a different type of experience. Where, what if
Yeah.
parenting could be something where rather than it handcuffing you and being something that you can't do everything you wanted to do and you have no life anymore and you're always tired and all this stuff. What if, is it possible? And this is the question mark I start out with. Is it possible where parenting could be something that you could do things you never even dreamt of doing, like even more things, than,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
is it possible you could have more energy? Maybe not in the similar way that people, but what if it's a different type of energy or different, I don't know, angle of energy? And what if it's like way better than anyone is so-called saying it is, Like what if their
Mhm.
experiences are
Mhm.
just their experiences because of their limited type of ability to solve, the problem at hand. And that's kind of like how I started out parenting, is kind of with questioning every single thing, out there in terms of traditional kind of, advice or knowledge. And that actually turned out to be awesome. That was probably one of the best things I did, because it totally
Yeah.
transformed, everything I did with my kids. Like, yeah.
I remember when you were telling me about this years ago at the Model 3 event, I think it was, you were telling me about like your excitement of being a parent, how you've like flipped the table on what everyone else, and I was like,
Mm.
wow, that sounds impossible. Yeah. But I think
Yeah.
you've done it. I mean, you're pretty much, you seem to, for me, I feel like, half the time I feel like what you're describing, but half the time I'm like, oh, stop screaming, like stop fighting with your brothers, like, and it's like a problem. But half the time I'm like so joyous to be around them. It's like incredible. Like you can't describe, I would never trade it for the world. And the half the time that maybe it's more than half the time, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying half and half, but there is periods of time where it's both for me. For me, it's just not all the time. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
rainbows and Lucky Charms for me,
Yeah, I mean,
unfortunately.
yeah, our kids. I mean, our kids are pretty feisty kids. I mean, they're very strong personalities, so they go at it. Um,
Yeah.
and but what makes it like really interesting is, I think that the key thing I do probably much different than most parents is, when kids are acting up or doing some stuff, I don't blame them. It's all on me.
As the parent to teach them.
It's
Yeah.
well,
I
actually,
agree with that too.
well, it's actually, I take it more to this place where, like, oh, there's something I'm doing, if I'm not able to solve this, right? Or to, there's something I'm not catching. There's something I'm
Mm.
like not understanding or seeing. Like, for example, I tell my wife a lot, I'm like, hey, like, you've got to up your persuasion game. Like, like if the kids aren't listening to you, then you've got to like, you've got to like, and I say to myself too, like, we have to up our game in how we're interacting with our kids. And I never put the blame on them, because I'm like, they're just kids, what are they? They're
Yeah.
having
Of
fun. They're
course.
doing
Yeah.
the thing that they want to do, like they think is the best
Yeah.
thing to do. There's nothing on them, right? And I think having that attitude, it forces me to have these deep periods of like introspection and really trying to like solve something, So a lot of times I'll
In
go
a
to
different
sleep.
way than most people think. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go to sleep like trying to solve a problem for my kids. And like I'm not blaming them at all, zero. And I think
Yeah.
having that experience, like I get all these breakthroughs, with how to resolve issues, and because of that, it's like it adds to that kind of like awesome experience, because I think once, if I start blaming my kids, it's a black hole. It's like a spiral down, because
Yeah.
then it's like out of your control, and it's like, how can you fix your kids or change your kids? And it's like it just becomes this whole nother entity that is just like,
Yeah.
it's just overwhelming in a sense, once you start down that road. But if it's really about you as a parent, and it's just, tackling another way, having more creativity, having more, insight or whatever, and you can actually go and do that, then it becomes something like exciting. It's kind of challenging. Like it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm up for the challenge. Like, I got to up my game, and so that's how I take it. Yeah, and I think
Dude, we should do that. Me and you should be on that show where we like switch dads for a week, and like you can be dad of my kids for a week and see how crazy it is, and I'll be the dad of your kids and be like, oh, these are
yeah.
angels.
No, you would be surprised though. Actually, my kids would eat up almost any parent. Like they're
Oh,
so,
would they?
yeah, they're really just like,
My kids
Yeah.
are like, when can we use the iPad? When can we use the iPad? Every day, every second. And we're like, no, they only use it on like weekends at like 2 hours at a certain time. But on the
Yeah.
weekends, then like their day revolves around that time we give them
Yeah.
the iPad. It's
Yeah.
crazy,
No, I
and we have to like, yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I want like my son is very, very strong-willed. I mean, I think I don't know if I've met a person as strong-willed. He's like very, very. I mean, the thing is like, what's funny is and this might come across the wrong way to some people, but
Mm.
hey, um,
That's fine.
like because I've developed all these like skills and kind of creativity, and I understand kids. Like the other thing is like I worked with kids actually quite a bit, like in
Hmm.
prior times. Like I was always volunteering with kids, etc., teaching, helping. But um, I'm so confident with my ability with kids. Like I think in certain situations, if there's something that's really kind of like challenging health wise or mentally wise or emotionally, like really really challenging, that's hard. But in most cases, like I I I can really just deal with the kids because I like there's something about like kids that they're very simple in how they think, and if you
Yeah,
present kind of
they're
this,
readable. You can read what they're
yeah,
thinking a lot of times.
and a lot of times I think the parents they're equipped with the wrong tools. Like for example, they're equipped with rewards and punishment. Right? They're trying to bribe their
Hmm.
kids or threaten their kids, and it becomes this battle between the parents and kids.
Yeah,
On it's a power battle, right? Once you go down
yeah,
that road, it's like painful, in my opinion. In my opinion, I never
yeah,
use rewards or punishment. I don't go down the power hole at all because I think it's a dead end. It's like
yeah,
it's like dead. I'm not dead, but it's like I would say death, but it's like it just will kill my spirit to go down that road. What I
yeah,
rather go down to, I go down this road of empowerment
yeah. I
where
like that.
where
Yeah,
I'm like, it's your life. You're making your decisions. I'm not making any of your decisions for you, right?
yeah,
This is the road I go down, and my role is like, hey, I'm gonna try to help you, but you can take it. You don't have to take it, but I'll try to help explain in a fun way, in an interesting way, the decisions that they're making. You know, um, whether it's like they want to like, not brush their teeth or just they want to do some activity all day rather than another thing or whatever it is. I'm doing this approach where it's completely their decision. It's completely their responsibility, and I'm here to help them kind of make decisions, but I'm here to kind of just enlighten them, trying to show them the decisions that they're making. And so I'll take certain actions they do and just like say, okay, let's continue this extreme wise and see what let's imagine what will happen to you if you keep on doing
yeah,
this extreme thing, and if that is that what you want to do. And then and if the kid wants to do that, sometimes I'll play along with it. I go, okay, how can we bring that quickly right now, like
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
negative
yeah,
world, like right now, like whatever, like if the kids don't want to go to dentist or don't want to brush their teeth, I'm like, okay, fine, let's not brush our teeth for this whole week, and let's go to the dentist, see if you can find something. Like I try to encourage kind of like this
yeah,
10-year thing down quicker so they could kind of like
yeah.
feel it more, but it's always their decision. It's always their thing. There's never me
Yeah.
trying
No, I
to.
think that's really good. The empowerment is so valuable. I try to do that when I can too. Yeah, I think that when I see opportunities for that, it's very,
Yeah,
very important.
yeah, because I think a lot of the traditional approach of parenting is like like it's the whole thing of I don't have you ever watched Super Nanny at all or these programs
I
where
have
it's
seen that. Yeah, we've
yeah, it's
seen that
like
a long time
it's
ago.
the whole thing is like all these rules, keep to the
Yeah,
rules, or else you'll get
yeah,
timeouts, all this stuff.
yeah,
To me,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like I think it might work for certain, I think more compliant kids and stuff.
yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah,
but I think for a lot of kids, and I think it just also just has like this the wrong relationship type of you're setting up this thing where you're constantly an authority to your kids. And I
hmm,
think one of the things that I enjoy with my kids the most is I'm not an authority figure to my kids. Like I don't tell them
yeah,
what to do. Like I've never punished them, never like given them so-called reward for stuff. Like I'm not an authority type of like person, and that's why I don't have to act that way.
very
And
different.
yeah, I don't
Hmm.
have to act like I'm trying to keep control of the situation ever, you know?
Hmm.
And that adds
You're more of
to,
like an advisor, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like a goofy advisor too. Like meaning like I'm always just having fun, whatever, and it's their responsibility, their decisions. And yet I will intentionally steer them in the right way through advising and whatever coaching, etc. But they always feel in control. But I think like like when I'm around some people who are like have the authority thing going, I just feel so tired around them. I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
yeah,
how do you care? How do you put that? How do you keep that like on the whole day? It's like, my
yeah,
goodness, no
yeah.
wonder you're like exhausted by the end of the day. It's like,
Yeah, it lends itself to a lot of inconsistencies, and that's not good. You need the kids need some consistency in who they know you are and stuff. It's like if you're a power trip 1 minute and then the next minute you're too tired to be, and you just give them what they want, then it's very confusing to them too.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I personally never thought it would be possible to be a parent without kind of that authority approach. So
Yeah,
initially, it was just kind of like an experiment. Um, when my kid was just a few months old, and like it started out as this like, what if you could parent, as a friend,
yeah.
and not authority figure. What if you don't have to punish and threaten and bribe and all this stuff. And my wife at first didn't believe it was possible. Like she thought it was just like crazy.
Yeah.
But
That's what my wife thinks. I
yeah,
agree with you. I think I wish I knew about
uh,
your channel or parenting tactics 9 years ago. I'd try hard to convince my wife to like, let's just focus only on this type of style because I do think in the long run or even in the short run it's the right way and it'll make everything much better. We've gone down the traditional
yeah,
westernized culture parenting, not to the extreme some parents do with being so authoritative,
mhm,
but we definitely have rules and rewards and punishments and such. So
yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's ended up I mean, obviously I'm still, in progress with my kids, but it's like, yeah, it's gotten to this point where it's just like, oh my gosh, at least not all parenting, because every parenting situation is very different, but at least with my experience with my kids, it's just like, whoa, this is like 1,000 times better than I ever thought was even possible with having kids. Like I
yeah.
really thought that it would be like really exhausting and like a pain, Um,
Now, what are your thoughts on like allowance? Is there a point where you see yourself giving your kids an allowance or like giving them some money for chores they do, like sort of like inspiring a work ethic early on somehow like that? Or are you going to lay off that and let them kind of
yeah, I mean,
advise them how to do it outside of the family?
yeah, I mean, okay. So my first is almost turning 7, um, and yeah, he's like, I don't. Okay, so I have this. I mean, okay, this is kind of a crazy approach. I don't think it's applicable to most people in their situations, but it could be actually. But so I do this like extreme. Like I've thought about finances a lot, and I'm like,
Yeah.
the typical chore approach, like giving like money allowance, etc. It just for me, like I hated it as a kid. Um, and I don't think it taught me the right things either. It taught me like to be cheap with money and to like think it taught me how to be it was at least my experience with it. Other people can have a different experience, obviously. My experience with like kind of chores, money, etc., was it just made me feel more poor. It just brought out how much
Mhm.
money I didn't have, and how much
Yeah,
like
I mean, it made me feel that way, I would say, but it did give me early ideas that, later on, me and friends in our neighborhood, we would get together and be like, oh, we already did all the chores in our house. We really want this video game. Let's go around to the neighbors and see if we can rake their lawns for money too, or let's go to shovel the driveways
yeah,
at other neighbors' house. So it kind of inspired like an entrepreneurial thing over time, but
yeah, yeah.
it was helpful in that way for me, I thought.
Yeah. For me, it's like I all the chores in our house, like so our kids clean up, etc.
Hmm.
Like I've been just teaching them more from this angle of um, do for the sake of doing it. Meaning, like
Yeah.
I
We
don't
have a
want
lot of things like that
yeah
too, but
like
there's certain things, yeah.
yeah like I don't
Anyway.
want my kids actually to do anything in the house because of an allowance. Like I just want them to do it because they value the actual act of doing it. Like for example, like with
Mm.
cleaning up, I'm like, hey, you guys don't have to clean up, but what will happen as a coach, I'm just like, you don't clean up one day, 2 day, one day, it just becomes a habit.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna just have this crazy we're gonna have this crazy house that's just like
Yeah. dirty
it's like a
and
hoarder's house.
dishes everywhere.
And they're
Yeah.
like, and then I'm like, do you want to see what that looks like? And we'll watch some videos on hoarder houses and see the mice,
Yeah.
the mice infestations, right? All this
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
What if they think, oh, that's cute pets. I want that. What if
No,
they
no,
said that?
no. But we've always like showed, and they're like, oh my, and then we always ask, so do you want to do that? And like literally, like if you want to do that, we'll help you do that. We'll throw the food on the ground or something. And they always like choose the right thing because it just makes sense after a while, right? If you show the
Yeah.
extremes, extreme enough, like you're gonna want to do, I think, the right thing. And like I've always wanted to have that intrinsic motivation, like because I grew up never learning that stuff. No one taught me the intrinsic motivation, like to do stuff. It was always forced by these outside stuff, and I had the craziest messy room, like all throughout my youth and stuff. And it's because it's just people forego like you think about first principles. You don't clean your room because someone gives you an allowance. You clean your room
Yeah.
because you value like cleanliness, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just the basic. But yet with our kids, I feel like we skip that. We go, oh, okay, they can't learn the value of cleanliness, so we have to do something else. But I think it goes with everything, like with healthy eating and stuff, or with whatever. It's just like they have the ability, the cognitive ability, even at a couple years old, to understand like these basic concepts, of benefit, and so that's where I feel like sometimes we're shortchanging our kids when we rely too much on that stuff. The second thing is like I feel like teaching kids about money too early, I'm wary about, because I feel like they start to see everything with money, like through the eyes of money. They go, oh, how much is that? How much is that? If I had this much money, I could do this or buy that. Like it becomes this like money, the world revolves, like it becomes this whole thing. Everything is, if you have money, you can do this,
Yeah.
get this or that, right?
Yeah.
And when I think
Yeah.
about that, I'm like, fundamentally, I don't think that's the best way to view the world,
No, it's not.
it,
Yeah.
it's kind of a warped way. And I'm like, so what I'm doing with my kids is like it's kind of crazy. I talk a lot about finance or investing, but I don't talk about that to my kids. And I actually, like, whenever they want something, I just get it. But here's the condition.
Yeah.
The condition is like, first, it most of the time it can't be like instant. Sometimes I might say, oh, you have to wait a couple days or a week. Is that okay? Right? I'm teaching you to be patient a bit. The second thing is that they need to kind of, we call it pruning, but they need to downsize before they get something
And they
else.
exchange something.
Yeah, so it's kind of like when we're at a store, like, oh, can you get up, and then we go, oh, but what do you want to prune, and and it's something we're not forcing them, but we've got their buy-in, because we're like, oh, if we don't prune, right, what's going to happen to our toys and everything is just going to go crazy. Do you want to live like that, right?
Yeah.
So they're on board with pruning, and so what we're doing
That's
is
good.
like they're always having to prune before they get something else, right? But that process of pruning, it's really hard for them, because they're like, oh my gosh, what do I need to get rid of? And by doing that, it's really teaching them this skill of kind of like, like here's my thing. I think kids err typically on valuing things too much, holding on to them, like, their toys, whatever. They don't learn enough the opposite habit of letting it go, And a lot of parents are worried, like, oh, if I buy too much stuff for my kids will get spoiled, right? But that's not
Yeah.
the problem, in my opinion. I think the problem is your kids will learn to accumulate and have attachments to too many things without having the skill and the ability to
Yeah.
let it go. That's the problem.
And
in my
maybe that
opinion.
can transmit emotionally too.
Exactly, right. So I don't have a problem buying my kids a lot of stuff. I have a problem my kids being attached to the stuff that they get.
Yeah.
So as long as they're willing to let it go, so we prune stuff, we give it to Goodwill, etc., to other people, then we get something else. But what ends up happening is this process is quite slow. You would think that they would prune something every day and want to get something every day, but it's not that easy to prune.
It takes a while to let go.
Yeah,
of
to let
something.
go. That's the bottleneck. It's not the asking and
Yeah.
getting. It's the
Yeah.
and at most they
I
want
like
to.
that idea. I
Yeah,
think I'm gonna try to talk my wife into the pruning idea
yeah.
because our kids' rooms are just full of so much. But what would you do if they get presents at like a birthday party or for a holiday or from
Yeah,
relatives and
it's all
friends? What do
pruning.
you do?
Yeah, I mean, I will talk to them and say, hey, like even before they have a birthday party, okay, do you want to prune a bunch of stuff so you can keep
Keep
some
it.
stuff without
Or do they
having a
get to open
crazy
the presents
house.
and then see what they want to keep of the new presents and
Yeah,
prune, I guess, too?
yeah, and it's kind of like the sometimes we'll just like play with things for a week and just prune them, give them away.
And how do you make
Um,
it equal? Like, what if he's getting some like really big thing and they want to just exchange a little book for it or something? Like, do you still say, okay,
Yeah,
that's fine? Or how do
so
you,
so our kids don't know much about like how much things cost, which is I actually like it right now, but so it's mostly based
yeah,
on size and stuff.
size?
Yeah, right
Okay.
now. And so what what's cool about it is like the cycle turnaround time. It's hard for them to prune one more than one thing a week. Like that's really hard,
Wow.
And
Wow.
so
Yeah.
what's funny is even though I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm willing to buy whatever, right? Just like um, name it, like whatever. I'm actually probably buying less stuff for my kids than most all of my friends. Like they're all
Okay.
buying a ton more stuff for their kids. I'm
Okay.
actually like I barely ever say no to my kids. I'm like the most cheerful giver out there, right? To my kids.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're not asking for it as much as other kids because
Yeah.
they have to let go of something, right? And that process, I'm like, wow, that's actually to me that's kind of cool, First they get to have
Yeah.
like a clean house. We have like probably 1/10 the toy stash of most kids,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's
they
great.
don't have this like attitude where we're fighting to get stuff. We're on their side. Like we're like, yeah, let's go for it. Not want another Legos? Let's do it. What Legos do you want to do? Just which one do you want to
Yeah.
prune first? It's like
Yeah.
so we're together. We're
Yeah.
on their side. They're constantly changing out their toys at their own pace. What they want to do. They don't feel like like they're like being like deprived or something, right? And so for
Yeah.
me, I'm like, whoa, it works out. Like, yeah, but it's just so atypical though. It's just I've never heard this
Yeah.
approach done. It's just so weird in a sense.
It's like you're teaching them bartering instead of buying things
Yeah, yeah,
or like
yeah,
trading one good for another. Yeah.
yeah.
Directly.
Um, but eventually,
That's
I'll
cool.
teach them about money. I'm getting closer and closer to doing it, and I'm gonna be teaching them not with money in terms of the dollars per se, but I'm gonna start teaching them with bartering, with the trading idea. And so I'll start with actually like, hey, we own, some stock, in these companies. And I'm already starting to share some of these concepts, but, and we could trade, some of the stuff for other things. And everything is going to be in the context of trading. So it'll be like, oh yeah, it's like, we could trade this for this type of thing.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is kind of what you're saying is like, oh, if you want something, you could trade for it and you can
Hmm.
get that. So kind of what you did with your thing of like, hey, what can we do around the neighborhood to rake, mow the lawn,
Yeah.
get some more, money, whatever. It's the concept isn't the money itself. It's more of you can do certain things to get certain things to trade with, right? And
Yeah.
and to me that matches more of the utility of money, more, and it's going to be
Yeah.
ultimately more like beneficial, for them to think of money like that rather than as this like these coins and bills to buy everything they want in the world. Like,
Yeah.
to me, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's like
Yeah.
a
Just
weird
accumulating
way.
money for the sake of accumulating money or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But we'll see how it works
Wow.
out. I don't know. I haven't come across with many examples. Like a lot of the stuff I'm winging it. Like I don't have the examples. So I'm just like, okay, what would I have liked, to have, been parented like,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but and that's
Yeah.
kind of guiding
Yeah,
most of it. But
sometimes I feel like when I'm in the right mindset, like if I'm eating really well, like maybe I'm in like ketosis or whatever, I'm exercising, regularly and I'm like sleeping really good at night or whatever, then I'm optimized, for a period of time where I feel like I can really be in the moment with the kids and kind of think, like, really identify with what they're feeling and think and explain things on their level to them and be patient.
Mhm.
So there are times where I do feel a lot like that, but it's probably not the majority of time where I'm like super patient like that with the kids. But when I am, I feel like even when they're throwing tantrums, it doesn't faze me. I can get underneath them and kind of totally empathize with them, in a way, like remembering what it's like to be a kid where you don't understand the world and you're flipping out about whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 sure. I mean, yeah, lots of flipping out as kids. I'm used to
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a,
Crazy world we're bringing our kids into,
yeah, yeah.
right?
It's not
Axe
easy
the
being a
Infinities.
kid.
Your kid's gonna be trying to get the Axe the Infinities next, or whatever they
I
call them,
I haven't
axes.
shown anything like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Purposely waiting on all that stuff.
Few years,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
wait. He'll
definitely.
once he gets connected to the internet, it'll be a whole nother world.
Yeah, I have some ideas and plans for that though. But we'll see how it works out. Yeah. All right, Evan.
Cool.
Yeah, nice chatting. Thanks for hanging
Yeah.
out here and sharing your thoughts as well. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks,
Very nice.
Dave. All
Okay,
right.
take care. We'll see you.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.